Now let me show you the part where promises become very helpful. So let's imagine you're creating a login functionality, right? So I'm going to list the steps over here that you would want to take so you successfully log in a user. So let's say the user provides you with some information, right? So now your job is to check if that username actually exists in the database. So I'm going to say check if username exists. Now, this is an async activity. You are going to the database and checking some information, and the database is going to take a while, a few seconds, few milliseconds to respond and give you an answer. So either it's going to say yes, user is correct, or it's going to say no, user is not correct. So think about it as a resolve or reject scenario over here, right? Now let's continue on. There's more to it. So let's say if that is correct, then you're going to say yes. If that's the case, then you're going to say check if password is correct. And that's going to result in yes or no. So I'm going to say yes and no, right? So now let's say if the password is correct, then you're going to say check if account is valid, right? And then you're going to get a response yes or no. And based on that, you can do something. You can show a message to a user or whatever, right? So if all of these checks, the 3 checks that in our example is true, then you're going to say, okay, show success. But in any case where there's a no, so whether no happens on this level or this level or this level, you're going to simply show a message, let's say, failed login. Okay? So in this example over here, we only kind of said login, like we just kind of made a big picture. But actually you will have to, in the practical world, go through multiple steps so you can check if the user is really logged in or not. And actually more than this, but this is just a big picture. So let's say if you wanted to implement this functionality in a promise format, you would have to do that, or that would be the preferred way of doing that so that your code would be elegant and easy to code as well. So let's say if you're working with, some kind of library and they provide you with the database connectivity service. So they're going to provide you with a promise. So they're going to basically give you the ability to actually make that, use the promise, and once it's successful, you can do something. So let's say that's given to you and they do this for you, or maybe you do it yourself, doesn't matter, right? So if that's successful, this is going to give you the user object, the first task, which is check if user exists. If that's true, it's going to return, let's say, an object of the user. So it's going to say user is equal to true, let's say. And some user information, so maybe the email of the user. So I'm going to say email is equal to email@gmail.com. Let's say that's the username. Let's say if it is not successful, it's going to give you an object with message, which is no user found. Okay. So when you're using this promise, so let's say I'm going to call it check user promise. So you come over here and you would say check user and say if that is successful, then run this function. And what does this function do? The job of this function is to actually make another check, because the first check is true. We already did if the user exists, but now we want to check if the password is correct. So let's say you have another promise that this particular library provides you, which is, let's say, not check user, but let's say I'm going to create one, check password. I'm going to call it this. And this one, let's say if it's true, it also spits out the user object, right? And if that is incorrect, it's going to say password was incorrect. Okay, so that's another promise. The first promise, if you scroll up, checks the user, and the second promise checks the password. So I'm going to just close this down. So now over here, your implementation, if you're coding the application, you're going to be using this. So now you're going to do over here, you're going to say, okay, now some response happened, which I know, which is going to be true. So I don't need to do anything. Now I want to run the second promise, which is check password. And then if check password is true, I can say then over here, you remember this is another promise within, and I can run this function over here. Right? And let's say we're going to stop on 2 levels, and we're going to just stop here and say, okay, if that's true, then we're going to say response, and we're going to say console.log response. So just to show it to you, I'm going to actually just refresh over here. And in 4 seconds, we're going to see no user found, password was incorrect. Oh, because it's at false. I want to make it at true. So I'm going to make it true over here and save. And over here, I'm going to make it true as well. Save, scroll down. Now I'm going to refresh, and in 2 seconds, we got the response of one of the objects. So it's actually the second one, because this one is the one we're logging in, line number 54. So that's what happened. So now if you're coding your application, you would have these nested promises within promises within promises whenever you're doing multiple asynchronous activities. So you see it looks like a V. Your code would look like a V like that. You would just keep on nesting, 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 and it would just go on the right-hand side, and your code is going to look ugly. So what promises does over here is that, let's say, if you have these chain of promises that you are using and you have to check certain thing, and if that case is true, do something else, and check if the other case is true, then do something else. If you have this sequential task, you can actually don't need to do it like such. I will actually cut this out, all right? And I can simply return this promise, okay? Now what this does, what gives us the ability to do the then chaining over here. So remember that then method that I just cut, I can actually just paste it over here like such. So this is elegant. So this, whatever happens over here, whatever result happens will be transferred over here. And let's say if I want multiple promises, I can return another one, and I can make another then underneath. And I can keep on doing these tasks that I have, so my code is easy to read, and one promise is resulting in the then, that is returning another promise that is received to the next then, and so forth. And it just keeps on. Your tasks can be in one sequential order. So just to give you the demonstration on this step, I can simply save and now refresh, and our result should be the same. But our code is much more elegant, and we are chaining our operations. Now with that, I'm going to stop this video, and I'm going to talk to you in the next video where I'm going to show you the scenario where the catch method is also very helpful in the chaining sequence. Talk to you in the next lesson.